You explain an idea clearly, and people still ignore it. You ask for help politely, and somehow it turns into extra work for you. You try to set a boundary, and end up apologizing instead. The problem usually isn't your intelligence, confidence, or effort. It's framing. Small wording changes can completely change how people react to the exact same message. One version sounds confident and reasonable. Another sounds optional, weak, or easy to dismiss, even when the meaning is identical. In this video, you'll learn an ethical influence blueprint that shows how subtle wording shifts, change reactions at work, in friendships, and in everyday conversations. So people finally hear you, respect your time, and respond the way you intended. And this is educational content, not therapy or legal advice. Just practical psychology you can use immediately. You've probably had this happen before. You share an idea in a meeting, and the room moves on like you never spoke. 10 minutes later, someone repeats the same idea, and suddenly, everyone nods. Or you try to contribute in a conversation, but someone talks over you, and you let it go because interrupting feels rude. Or someone asks for a favor, and even though you're overloaded, your response comes out as, "Maybe, I'll try," instead of the clear, "No," you meant to say. And somehow, your time, your boundaries, and your ideas keep becoming optional. After a while, you start wondering if something's wrong with you. Maybe you're not confident enough. Maybe you're not assertive. Maybe people just don't take you seriously. But here's the important truth. Most of the time, this isn't about intelligence, personality, or competence. It's about communication mechanics, specifically framing. Framing simply means the way information is presented changes how people understand and respond to it. Two sentences can mean the exact same thing, but one sounds confident and reasonable, while the other sounds optional, uncertain, or easy to ignore. And people react not just to what you say, but to how it lands emotionally. In this video, you're going to learn how small wording changes dramatically shift reactions at work, with friends, and in everyday conversations. Not through manipulation, but through ethical influence, communicating in a way that respects both you and the other person. You'll get practical scripts, real conversation examples, and tools you can start using immediately so people actually hear you, respect your time, and respond more positively. And just to be clear, this video is educational. It's not therapy, legal advice, or clinical guidance, just practical psychology and communication tools you can apply in real life. If you want more people to actually listen when you speak, hit like, so this video reaches others who need these skills too. Now, let's look at why so many capable people were never taught these skills in the first place. Here's something most people never realize. A lot of capable, intelligent professionals struggle with influence, not because they lack ideas or competence, but because no one ever taught them how persuasion actually works. In school, you're taught to solve problems, memorize information, and give correct answers. But almost no one teaches you how to communicate ideas in a way people naturally accept and support. Instead, many of us grow up believing communication myths like, just be clear and people will understand. Or, if you're right, people will agree. But real conversations don't work like that. People don't react only to logic. They react to emotion, perception, and how safe or threatened they feel by what they're hearing. And this isn't guesswork. It comes from decades of research in influence psychology and behavioral science, fields that study how people actually make decisions in real life. Researchers like Robert Cialdini showed that small psychological cues dramatically change agreement and cooperation. Behavioral economics revealed that people often make emotional decisions first, and logical ones second. And negotiation experts like Chris Voss demonstrated that tactical empathy, understanding, and addressing emotions in conversation changes outcomes more than pressure or arguments ever could. But here's the key point for this channel. We're talking about ethical persuasion. Ethical persuasion means influence that benefits both sides. No deception, no manipulation, no forcing people into decisions. Just clearer communication, so your needs and ideas are taken seriously while respecting others. And over the next parts, we're going to build this step by step. First, you'll learn the core framing principles that change how messages are received. Then, you'll see practical scripts and phrases you can actually use in real conversations. After that, we'll walk through real-life applications and scenarios. And finally, you'll get simple ways to practice these skills so they become natural, not forced. Because here's the first big idea to remember. People react emotionally before they react logically. So if your wording triggers resistance, uncertainty, or confusion, logic alone won't save the conversation. Which is why, next, we're going to break framing down into clear principles you can use immediately. Let's start with one of the most powerful framing principles you can use immediately. Loss versus gain framing. In simple terms, people react more strongly to potential losses than to potential gains. Psychologists call this loss aversion, which means losing something feels more painful than gaining something of equal value feels good. Your brain is wired to protect what it already has before chasing something new. And you see this everywhere. A deadline reminder that says, "Finish early to stay relaxed," sounds nice, but it rarely creates urgency. But when the message becomes, "If we miss this deadline, the whole project gets delayed," suddenly attention increases. Now people feel they might lose progress, reputation, or time. Health messaging works the same way. Saying, "Exercise helps you live longer," is positive but abstract. Saying, "Lack of exercise increases your risk of serious illness," gets attention because now something valuable feels at risk. And this principle shows up in everyday workplace communication too. Imagine you ask a coworker, "I'd appreciate it if you could send the report today." That sounds polite, but also optional. Nothing feels urgent or important. Now compare it to, "If we don't get the report today, the client meeting tomorrow becomes much harder for all of us." The request is the same, but now the consequence is clear. You're not threatening. You're simply framing the real cost of delay. Here's another small shift in scheduling. Ineffective version. "Can we try to meet earlier?" Stronger framing. "If we don't meet earlier, we'll probably run out of time to fix issues before the deadline." Notice the difference. The second version helps people see what they might lose, not just what they might gain. Even team cooperation improves with this shift. Instead of, "It would be great if everyone updated their progress daily," try, "If updates don't happen daily, small problems turn into big ones before we can fix them." Same request, different reaction. In conversation, the change can be subtle. Could you help finalize this today?" Colleague, "I'm pretty busy." Sounds like today's already packed. Colleague, "Yeah." If we miss today, tomorrow becomes stressful for everyone." Colleague, "Yeah, let's wrap it up today." Small framing change, big reaction shift. And again, the psychology is simple. Your brain prioritizes avoiding loss over gaining benefits. So, ethical framing isn't about fear. It's about helping people see real consequences clearly, so cooperation feels logical and fair. Comment framing if you believe persuasion should always stay ethical. Next, we'll look at another powerful shift. How framing someone's identity changes how they behave in conversations. The second framing principle is even more subtle, but incredibly powerful. Identity framing. In simple terms, people tend to act in ways that match how they see themselves. So, when a request connects to someone's identity, the kind of person they believe they are, cooperation feels natural instead of forced. Think about the difference between these two phrases. Please be responsible and finish this, versus you're someone who's always reliable when things matter. Both sentences ask for responsibility, but the second one frames responsibility as part of the person's identity, and most people want to act consistently with how they see themselves. Psychologists call this the consistency principle. Once people see themselves a certain way, they try to behave in ways that match that image. And you see this constantly at work. Imagine telling a colleague, "Can you try to help more with the project?" It sounds vague and slightly critical. Now compare it to, "You're usually the person who keeps projects on track. Could you help us do that again here?" Same request, but now you're activating an identity they're likely proud of. Professional identity works strongly because people spend so much time building their reputation. When your framing acknowledges that identity, cooperation feels aligned with who they are, not like extra effort. This works at home too. Instead of saying, "Can you clean up after yourself?" Try, "You're usually really good about keeping things organized. Can we keep doing that?" Or with team collaboration, instead of, "Everyone needs to communicate better." Try, "We're a team that usually solves problems quickly because we keep each other updated." Let's hear how a small dialogue shift sounds. Manager, "I need this done correctly." Employee, "I'll try." Manager, "You're usually the person I trust with details." Employee, "Okay, I'll make sure it's solid." Nothing changed except the identity frame. But here's an important ethical reminder. Identity framing works best when it's genuine. If praise feels fake, people resist it. The goal isn't manipulation. It's recognizing and reinforcing positive traits that already exist. Because when people feel seen as competent, reliable, or helpful, they naturally act that way. Next, we'll look at another framing shift that reduces resistance completely. How giving people a sense of choice changes cooperation. The third framing principle explains why even reasonable requests sometimes get pushback. People resist when they feel controlled. Humans have a strong need for autonomy, the feeling that they're making their own choices. The moment someone feels forced, even slightly, resistance shows up. Sometimes it's obvious. Someone says, "You have to do this," and the other person immediately pushes back. But resistance also appears in softer ways. Delays, excuses, minimal effort, or passive agreement followed by inaction. The issue isn't always the request. It's how much control the other person feels they still have. This is where choice framing makes a huge difference. Compare these two approaches. Demand framing. "I need you to finish this today." Choice framing. "Would it be easier to finish this today or tomorrow morning so we stay on track?" Both aim for completion, but the second version gives the person ownership in the decision. And when people feel they have a say, cooperation rises naturally. You can use this when asking for agreement too. Instead of, "Can you commit to this plan?" Try, "What part of this plan works best for you moving forward?" Now they're participating instead of complying. The same applies when asking favors. Ineffective. "Can you help me with this?" Better framing. "Do you have 10 minutes now? Or would later today work better?" Notice the shift. Help is still requested, but timing becomes their choice. Choice framing also works well when negotiating tasks. Instead of, "You'll need to handle this section," try, "Which part of this project would you prefer to take ownership of?" Here's how a conversation might sound using calibrated questions. Questions that guide thinking without pressure. You, "We need this resolved quickly." Colleague, "I've got a lot on my plate." You, "Sounds like your workload's heavy right now." Colleague, "Yeah." You, "What's the best way for us to handle this so neither of us gets overloaded?" Colleague, "I can take part of it today." No force, just guided autonomy. The psychology is straightforward. When people feel they're choosing, not being ordered, resistance drops. And again, ethical influence means using this to create cooperation that feels fair, not manipulative. Type yes in the comments if you want more practical phrases you can use in real conversations. Next, we'll combine framing with one of the most powerful conversation skills available: tactical empathy. So your words don't just sound right, they actually land emotionally. So far, you've seen how framing changes reactions, but framing becomes dramatically more powerful when combined with another skill: tactical empathy. In one sentence, tactical empathy means showing the other person you understand their perspective and emotions before trying to influence the outcome. People don't resist because they're difficult. They resist because they don't feel heard, respected, or understood. When empathy comes first, influence becomes cooperation instead of persuasion. There are 3 simple tools you can use immediately. First is mirroring, repeating the last few important words someone said to encourage them to expand. Second is labeling emotions, calmly naming what the other person seems to be feeling. Third is calibrated questions, open-ended questions that guide problem-solving without pressure. Now let's see how framing works when empathy comes first. Imagine this ineffective version. Manager: we need this finished today. Employee: I'm overloaded. Manager: everyone's overloaded. Just do it. Resistance immediately rises. The employee feels dismissed. Now watch the framed, empathetic version. Manager: we need this finished today. Employee: I'm overloaded. Manager: sounds like you're dealing with a lot right now. Employee: yeah, it's been non-stop. Manager: non-stop? Employee: exactly. Manager: if this slips, tomorrow becomes stressful for the whole team. What's the best way for us to solve this without overloading you further? Notice what changed. Empathy first, then framing consequences, then shared problem solving. The employee now feels respected, not pressured. Here's another example. Friend: I can't help this weekend. You: sounds like you really need some downtime. Friend: yeah, I'm exhausted. You: exhausted. Friend: exactly. You: if we don't finish this move now, it drags into next week for both of us. How can we make this easier for you? When empathy is real, people often respond with relief and then cooperation. Sometimes the conversation ends with what negotiators call a "that's right" moment, when the other person feels fully understood. You: it seems like you're trying to protect your time, but still help when you can. Friend: yeah, that's right. And once someone feels understood, solutions come easier. So now, you've learned the principles: loss framing, identity framing, choice framing, tactical empathy. Next, we move from principles to real-life strategies, step-by-step scenarios, where you'll see these techniques working together in everyday situations. Let's now put everything together in a real workplace situation. Imagine this. You're in a meeting, you share an idea, and the room moves on without reacting. No feedback, no discussion, just silence. Later, someone else presents a similar idea, and suddenly everyone supports it. This happens to smart professionals all the time. And usually, the problem isn't the idea, it's how the idea is framed and delivered. Let's look at the ineffective version first. You: maybe we could try simplifying the onboarding process. Silence. Manager: okay, next item. Your suggestion sounds optional, uncertain, easy to skip. Now let's walk step by step through a better version using the principles you've learned. First, identity framing. Instead of presenting the idea alone, connect it to team identity. You: our team is usually good at removing friction for customers, and I think we can do that here too. Now you're aligning the idea with something the group already values. Next, loss framing. You continue. If onboarding stays this complicated, we'll probably keep losing customers in the first week. Now the idea addresses a risk, not just an improvement. Then comes empathy labeling, especially if resistance appears. Manager. Changing this now might slow us down. You. Sounds like you're worried changes could disrupt what's already working. Manager. Exactly. You've acknowledged their concern instead of arguing with it. Finally, add choice framing. You say, would it make more sense to test a smaller change first or review possible improvements next meeting? Now you're not forcing agreement. You're offering controlled options. Watch how the reactions differ. Old version, silence, dismissal, topic change. New version, discussion, engagement, collaboration. Manager. Let's review options next meeting. Team member. Yeah, that makes sense. Your idea is now part of the conversation. Why does this work psychologically? Because people feel their identity is respected, risks are clear, their concerns are acknowledged, and they still have control over decisions. Influence isn't about pushing harder. It's about framing ideas so cooperation feels logical and safe. Share this video with one friend or coworker who's smart but keeps getting talked over. Next, we'll apply the same blueprint to everyday situations, especially when setting boundaries without damaging relationships. Now, let's move outside the workplace, because framing matters just as much in personal situations, especially when you're trying to set boundaries without damaging relationships. Imagine a common situation. A friend or coworker regularly asks for favors at the last minute. Maybe rides, help with projects, or covering shifts. And even when you're exhausted or busy, you end up saying yes. Your old reaction might sound like this. Friend. Can you help me move this weekend? You. Yeah. I guess I can try. You agree, but feel frustrated afterward. And because you didn't clearly set a boundary, the pattern repeats. This is what we can call apologetic compliance. Saying yes to avoid discomfort, then resenting the outcome. Now, let's improve the interaction using framing. First, frame your limit positively, not defensively. Instead of apologizing, communicate clearly. You. Weekends are usually my time to recharge, so I can handle work properly during the week. You're not rejecting them. You're explaining your reality. Next, use structured choice framing, so cooperation remains possible without sacrificing your boundary. You continue. I can't help this weekend, but I could help next Wednesday evening or help you plan it ahead of time. You're offering alternatives, not shutting the door. And notice how this keeps the relationship intact. Friend. Yeah, next week could work. Let's hear the improved dialogue in full. Friend. Can you help me move this weekend? You. Sounds like you're trying to get everything done quickly. Friend. Yeah, I'm kinda stuck. You. Weekends are usually when I recharge, so I can't help then. But I could help Wednesday evening or help you plan the move so it goes faster. Which works better? Now your boundary is clear, cooperation is still possible, and resentment doesn't build. And this is important. Ethical influence isn't about winning conversations. It's about creating outcomes where both sides feel respected. Here are 2 small practice prompts you can try this week. Think of one situation where you usually say yes, but feel frustrated afterward. How could you explain your limit clearly instead of apologizing? And second, what alternative option could you offer so cooperation stays possible? Even small wording shifts change how people respond and how you feel after the conversation. Next, we'll turn everything you've learned into a simple practice system, so these skills become natural in everyday conversations. Understanding framing is powerful, but influence only becomes real when it turns into habit. So let's make this practical with a simple system you can start using immediately. First, try this daily exercise. Rewrite 1 sentence per day. At the end of your day, Think of one conversation where your message didn't land the way you hoped. Maybe a request was ignored, or a boundary wasn't respected. Ask yourself, how could I frame that differently? Instead of, sorry, I'm busy, maybe next time you say, I need to finish this today so tomorrow doesn't become stressful. Instead of, maybe we could try this, you try, if we don't adjust this now, we'll keep running into the same problem. One rewritten sentence per day slowly rewires how you communicate. Second, start pre-framing important conversations. Before meetings, requests, or negotiations, take 30 seconds and ask, what matters to the other person? What risk or benefit will they care about? Then frame your message around that perspective, not just your own need. Third, use mental rehearsal. Before a conversation, quickly imagine how the other person might respond. Then prepare a calm, empathetic reply. If they resist, how will you label their concern? What choice can you offer? How will you keep cooperation possible? This prevents you from defaulting to apologetic or defensive responses. Now here's your simple influence challenge for the week. Pick one upcoming conversation, at work, with friends, or at home, and apply just one framing shift. Maybe you use loss framing to show urgency. Maybe identity framing to encourage cooperation. Maybe choice framing to reduce resistance. You don't need perfection. You're experimenting. And if it feels awkward at first, that's normal. Every skill feels unnatural before it becomes automatic. If this changed how you think about influence, comment blueprint. So I know you're building your skills on purpose. Next, we'll bring everything together into one final blueprint so you can walk away with a clear, ethical influence system you can use in real life. Let's bring everything together into one simple blueprint you can carry into real conversations. You've learned that small wording shifts can completely change how people react. Not because people are irrational, but because human decisions are emotional first and logical second. So here's your influence blueprint recap. First, loss versus gain framing. People act faster to avoid loss than to gain benefits. When you clearly show what might go wrong without sounding threatening, cooperation becomes logical instead of optional. Second, identity framing. People act consistently with how they see themselves. When your request connects to someone's positive identity, reliable teammate, supportive friend, responsible professional, cooperation feels natural, not forced. Third, choice framing. People resist when they feel controlled. But when you offer structured choices instead of demands, resistance drops because autonomy stays intact. And finally, tactical empathy. When people feel understood, they stop defending themselves and start solving problems with you. Mirroring, labeling emotions, and asking calibrated questions help conversations move from tension to collaboration. Put together, these tools create ethical influence, communication that works without manipulation. And remember something important. Influence isn't a personality trait, it's a skill. No one is born knowing how to frame conversations effectively. People learn it through awareness and practice, which means if you're learning this now, you're not behind, you're ahead. Because most people go through their entire careers never understanding why some conversations succeed and others fail. And as you continue building these skills, we'll keep expanding this blueprint. Negotiation techniques, boundary-setting scripts, confidence framing, and real-life persuasion tools you can use immediately. So before we wrap up, here's your final action step. Like the video if you learned at least one technique you're going to try this week. Comment your next real situation, at work, with friends, or in relationships, where you want more influence, and include an all-caps keyword like framing or negotiation. And subscribe to the Influence Blueprint and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next set of ethical persuasion tools and practical phrases. Remember, Influence isn't about controlling people. It's about communicating so clearly and respectfully that cooperation becomes the natural outcome. And now, you have the blueprint.